At 2:03 of December the 3rd, that the North Huron Museum Committee accept the agenda for December 3rd, 2020 committee meeting is amended to include updated versions of agenda item 7.4, relocation of artifacts, and 7.5, deaccessioning budget. Do I have a mover? Joan, seconder? Berna, all in favor? Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interests, anybody? Seeing none. Public comment, you won't have to go there, no one's out in the public. Minutes of the previous meeting that the North Huron Museum Committee hereby adopts the minutes of the meeting held November 5th, 2020 as presented. Do I have a mover?
Some.
Rock, seconder? He'll come.
Dixie Lee.
Dixie Lee. Dixie Lee. Sorry, Dixie Lee. All in favor? Okay. Delegations? None? Now, to our reports. 7.1. Council proposal.
Councillor Hefner. Okay, so at the last council meeting, which was, what date was that, December 16th? No, November 16th. Councillor Hefner and I reported back to council about the discussion that was held here with the museum committee and regarding the service level review and the recommendation that came out of that report. There was a very lengthy discussion about it and, you know, the steps to take forward, or the steps to go forward and what council is really looking for from this committee. There was discussion around the staffing component of it and things like that. Council did pass a motion, which is included in your package. If you want, I can read it to you. But basically, they would like the committee to bring forward a couple proposals. One that doesn't make use of township resources for the delivery of museum programming and services. And then staff were directed to talk to Mr. Kuyvenhoven with respect to his proposal back to the municipality. The other proposal, basically we want one proposal with staffing resources, one without staffing resources is what they're looking for. And the last part of it is, so the last part of that recommendation, recommendation that's in your package there states that staff were to meet with Mr. Kuyvenhoven and discuss whether or not there was any option to his proposal to the township for the transfer of the museum with respect to staffing resources. So part of the so when the Mr. Kuyvenhoven came forward with the proposal to township council to transfer the property or the building over to the township, was subject to certain conditions. So $1 was part of that it would be transferred for $1, but another part was that it would have to be used as a museum/tourism information center for 20 years. And then another condition was the staffing component of it, that a staff resource be located there through the week, Monday to Friday, and then on the weekends, like during the tourism season, then students and volunteers could be used to operate the museum and things. So that was the conditions on the building transferring over and things. So at this point, I guess I'll just move ahead and say we have Councillor Heffer and I, or Chairman Heffer and I, have met with Mr. Kuyvenhoven, and it's, basically it's not negotiable. In that terms, those were the conditions that were set for the township to receive the building and things, so.
So, question?
Yes, I've got a couple, 3 of them. I'm not sure who the Director of Recreation and Community Services, is that local?
That's me.
Okay, that's you, Vicki, okay, I just didn't know for sure. And I'm sorry that I can't hear you as well as I'd like to.
Oh, I can speak up, Lou, if I need to, sorry.
Okay, but I'm saying you may have already addressed this and I just couldn't hear it. But what are you actually meaning by township resources for delivery of museum programming?
It's the staffing of the museum.
Yes.
Locating a staff person there at the museum.
And by that, by staff, I sometimes find that in the things we're all saying, I'm not sure whether we're referring to staff as municipal staff, or whether we're already into an area of talking about museum staff that we hire. So you're saying, when you're referring to resources here for delivery of museum programming, you're talking about local people, you're talking about yourself, right?
Yeah, so, as mentioned, there was a condition on for the transfer of the building to occur.
Yes.
That staff resources would have to be located at that building, relocated to that building. The idea would, sorry, Doug,
Well,
did you want?
just, I said, you gotta move one person to work in that office at the train station, so there's a body there. It doesn't mean a full-time staff person for the museum, it just means there's somebody from the township of North Huron that opens the door and closes at night, turns the lights out, and is there in case somebody wanders in, if we don't have volunteers in.
Okay, and Doug and Vicki, I'm just talking to both of you because you're talking to me. I'm not sure at this point in time, but these are the things I've got to get straightened out. Amanda knows I was talking to her and I'm saying there's so many holes in my head about what is a decision and what is still a proposal. And so who's giving this directive to say we still are considering moving some of our municipal staff to the building for certain elements of functioning?
So the decision will be made by council.
And when? Has it been made? Has it not been made?
It has not been made, and that's why they want 2 proposals.
Okay.
So they want to see a proposal that will indicate what the staffing hours would be required, as in, so in part of the discussion we had with Mr. Kuyvenhoven, we said with people coming and going, it was estimated that it would be that staff person would have to probably basically spend about 10 hours of their time a week dealing with people coming and going, coordinating the volunteers, and assisting with recruitment of volunteers and doing any setup kind of things of displays or exhibits, okay? But at the last meeting, we also talked that person would be responsible for the supervision of any students that were brought in as well. So what council's saying is bring forward 2 proposals.
Okay.
Okay.
I understand you now. I do.
One with staff resources, one without staff resources. The issue that we kind of have at this point is Mr. Kuyvenhoven's proposal to council was that he'll transfer the building over for $1, subject to staff resources being allocated there.
I guess my only concern, and then I'll be quiet. I think we're doing this backwards, in the sense that until a decision is made as to whether indeed we're even going to be bothered moving and satisfy Doug's proposal, which is so generous, then I don't see how you can organize your building and your staffing and your programming and your education until you know that it's actually going to happen, because it happens afterwards. That's my concern. Now I'm quiet. Sorry.
Thank you, Verna?
Well, really, Doug has already stated, and I totally agree with him, because if you don't have a staff person there, I've seen what's happened in the past, that it's not open. And if it's gonna be for tourism as well, you have to have somebody there. And if Doug has already agreed that he's not changing his mind on it, then we don't have to worry about either one of these proposals, because he's already said what the proposal is. We don't need to do two different proposals. We know what proposal we're working on.
That's agreed.
Yeah, agreed. That's what we came up with, okay? But we just had to take it back to Mr. Kivenhoven.
Yeah.
That's what.
And he solved the problem.
Well,
Well, yeah,
I mean, they were obligated to come see me to discuss this, to say,
yeah,
would you consider an alternative with no staff resources from North Huron? So it's
That's
a
no good.
volunteer-run organization.
No.
You have staff, you gotta raise the money to pay for the staff and not the township. And I basically said, that's not gonna fly.
No,
It's just
it
not,
won't
it's
work.
not sustainable.
yeah, we got an answer for that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
For-
Then I thought I saw a hand,
Yeah, Joan.
It
Joan,
was
I'm
me,
sorry.
and I just back up what Verna said,
Oh.
like, that's redundant now, right?
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, and, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, just to help you out there, our whole proposal includes the one staff person, like, that's all we're asking for in our proposal to the council. So we haven't got cart before ahead of the horse, we're coming together with all the numbers, we're saying, here's what's gonna cost, and this is what we recommend, and then that's what's gonna cost them for staffing. So it is, they can't make the decision on the museum without knowing what the plan is as far as operation goes, how's it gonna run, and what's it gonna cost to run it. They need to have the whole ball in a package handed to them saying, this is what we propose. Then they can
Except
decide.
I see in the reports that are going to be talked to today, I see the possibility of a temporary curator to look after the deconcessioning and so on. And if you're going to spend the money on a curator, then you are already into the operational part, because that's the most important person.
But it's part of the whole ball of wax though, it's still part of the whole package that we're presenting. to council.
Okay, Doug, I'm sorry if I'm being
It's all-
difficult here, but some of this language doesn't make sense to me. So,
No.
thank you.
Yeah, I think it'll work itself out after we're done today, I
Okay,
really do
thank
think
you.
that, okay? So, any other questions with that? Okay, so we'll carry on to 7.2. Same board, man. Do I have the wrong number here? Sorry, do I have the wrong number?
Oh, it's 7.2.
7.2? So who is that?
Dixie Lee and Lou.
Me?
Dixie Lee?
Dixie? Oh, sorry, Verna.
Well, I've got a question about this KPMG report. The last article in the newspaper is talking about the investment would be upwards of $4 million. Are they talking about this building?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
Well, then what the hell good is the KPMG report? They're not talking about the right thing at all.
They were talking about two different things. So what they did was they looked at the reports that had come forward about all the repairs that had to be done for that building, but then they also looked at the operational side of things
But where did they come up with $4 million?
for the
Yeah.
for the building. But that was just to repair that building. But the operations of the museum, that was more in the text of it was in the body of the report and things, and that's not something, that's not considered a mandatory service or a traditional service of a municipality. It's a what they call a discretionary service.
But they were basing their recommendation on what they found.
Not on the building. It was based on what other municipalities are doing. The whole thing was to look at the level of service that is provided, right? And so they looked at what services a municipality of this size offers in Ontario and things. And they looked around this area as well as other areas, because there's a list of municipalities that, are what they call comparators. And that's what they were looking at, is, yeah.
Well, it's certainly,
I haven't read the article.
well,
Brenda.
when you read the article, if you were Blow Joe here in this community, you'd say, holy mackerel, $4 million, what are we talking about even moving to the train station for?
Yeah.
If that's what it's gonna cost.
Yeah.
It's a whole misconception.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're not gonna go that way at all. We're going to carry on so we have a real good presentation to council. That's where we're
Good.
going. So now we got Dixie Lee and Lou.
I'm the one here.
Oh,
I'll
Okay,
take
fine.
it, Dixie Lee, because with
got
a little bit of talking with Amanda,
I got a blank page.
so, I asked if this work plan task, which was never presented, could be presented today, because I felt if Dixie Lee and I went back and just added another detail or two, we'd be just doing the same thing we'd already done. So, the task was, ready for March, to do research, and you've just been talking about it, Verna, in order to suggest the most used approach to museum management, which might guide the oversight of the North Huron Museum after it is opened. Now, Dixie Lee and I took an afternoon, and we, the next area is research resources related to this report. And we read the bylaw number 23 done in 2003 by this community. So it focused on the things that we still have to think about. Then we read the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport and their museum standards, because we have talked about bringing in staff, Vicki says she is, into the mix. So we read all of that. Then we had heard Elizabeth French Gibson, and I mean, I think we're very lucky to have that expert group of people who say they are so willing to confer and direct. So we also took that, and that's local. Then we actually did 2 visits into museum sites. And I went to St. Mary's Museum and Archives, and Dixie Lee went to Strathroy Caradoc Museum, and they are very different. They operate very differently, so it gave us 2 views as to how you can manage this kind of thing. And then we were asked to produce 1 page, and that was the task for us. So the consensus that we decided on after doing that research was relating to the overseeing of the museum after it reopens. A board of management we found in every single instance. 6 to 9 people is a suggestion, with 1 being a counselor. And this is what I would call your management team. They're not going to be paid. They're going to be local. They're going to represent the ordinary North Huron person and what they think. And they only oversee and discuss the operation of the museum on behalf of council. They don't make up the rules and the agenda, but they are there as spokespeople. The board's mandate will be clearly defined, as will its relationship to staff, and there's where I needed to make sure I understood what that word meant, staff. And any changes, limitations is subject to council approval. So they're the council voice in the whole setup. And then we put as our final statement, further refinement of all aspects of such a body, that's this management group, will be strengthened by council's decision to move forward. And there's where my confusion is. I think that maybe it's difficult for them to know, as Doug is saying, until the whole parcel's there, but at the same time, it's very difficult for these managerial groups to operate if there isn't any museum to operate around. And I'm going to suggest, I've written another whole page here, but you don't want to hear that. I'm saying I reduced this whole page to 2 words. And they stick in my mind and they stick in my craw because I don't seem to have a full understanding of them. And those 2 words are vision and decision. And it seems to me that that's what our group, we've done a whole lot of work, we've done a whole lot of reading, we've done a whole lot of reporting, and I think now we're waiting for the interaction of the power team, which is council, with vision and decision.
Thank you very much, Lou. Okay, do you have anything to add to that, Dixie?
Well, I would just say that if everyone is thinking, well, there's still a lot of gaps in this, and what will council make of it? I would just go back to something we received very early on, which council received, I think, the standards for community museums in Ontario. And the governance standard just lays it out over 1.5 pages exactly how a community museum must be. And what we've said here jives with this, because, you know, why wouldn't you follow these provincial government, yes, Government of Ontario standards? So if people need more detail, that's all I'm saying. How is everything going to shake down? It's right here, so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
That's right.
Thank you. Brock,
It seems to me that we haven't quite come to that decision point yet. We've been talking about using the resources that are offered to us by Mr. Kuyvenhoven and the conditions that he attaches to the I'll call it donation. Now we're talking about putting a staff person from the North Huron staff in that building so that they are present to open and close and do various other things. That's a far cry from hiring an archivist, or at least a
Curator.
curator, I think.
Yeah.
And then giving us the advantage of being able to request donations or contributions from government, but it's an expensive step to take, and we haven't come to that point yet to discuss that. We've been discussing mostly moving a staff person who will be doing part-time oversight of the museum and part-time perhaps other work, other duties related to the community. Those are 2 very divergent approaches, both of which make sense under certain circumstances. But I don't think we're at that bigger decision yet.
go ahead, Vicki.
So I just kind of following up on what Brock's saying, and things, just, you know, at the last meeting we had, there was a discussion that went around the table when we were talking about a curator being there versus a staff person being there. And I think one of the key decisions that you need to make is whether this is a community museum or it's a, I'm trying to think what the terminology is, but they're accredited museum. An accredited museum requires a curator, whereas a community museum, correct me if I'm wrong, does not.
Right.
Is that
I don't
right?
think it says, let me see.
But I think that's what Doug was trying to say at the, because you certainly, you know, when you become an accredited museum, there's much more stringent things or guidelines or rules that you have to follow, especially if you're trying to get funding. I think so. Certain funding programs would require that you have that in place, but a community museum is run differently, and I think that, kind of touching on what Brock said, is that decision kind of needs to be made, and then based on it being a community museum, then you can start to,
Okay, I'm not sure, okay, Lou then, okay, go ahead, Lou.
The page I didn't read, and I won't read it all. Regulation governing grants, and I thank you, Vicky, states that a museum must have an appointed curator.
Yeah.
You're not going to get grants at all unless you have a curator. And the list of things that a curator does inside a museum are everything that a volunteer really can't do. We know that. Volunteers can be directed by a curator to do many, many things, but they don't have the professional background that is demanded by calling yourself a museum. And you're quite right, Vicki. If you're happy to call yourself a local museum, but I remember Verna saying last week, well, we've only got one reason for anybody to come to Wingham. And she's a hero of that. But that is not what an entire museum does. Verna can, you know, top up her Alice Munro and it'll be wonderful. But museums go a lot further than that if you want to be called a museum.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Doug, you had something?
Yeah, like I think this is a really important point here for our committee to a bridge for us to cross here. I can tell you from my own knowledge of the council, the politics, and the financial pressures on the town, if our committee comes forward and says we gotta have a curator, it ain't gonna pass. Let's just fold up our tent and go home, okay? Because that's gonna be a huge overhead, right? What are you talking, $100,000 a year with benefits at least for a curator?
Well, I saw your listing
Okay, so
and I looked it up already.
So councilors, I can just tell you from my own gut, and I think Paul knows as well, that ain't gonna happen. Like, so we gotta make a choice. If you guys wanna go full hog for having a curator and having a full-blown accredited museum, that's fine. But I mean, I'm pretty sure, you know, in 3 months I'll have a for sale sign in front of the museum, in front of the train station. I'm not threatening anybody, I'm just saying, that's what I believe is the reality. Like, if, you know, so then, is the committee okay with having a community museum, a non-credit museum? And then the dollars you go after are tourism dollars, right? Visitor information, tourism dollars, that's the kind of grants you go after. You don't go after the full museum type things. We still fundraise and all that kind of stuff, and we do the best we can, and hopefully we raise the money that's needed. But, you know, I just don't see it flying where council's gonna vote in favor of reopening the museum with that kind of an overhead attached to it with a curator.
Does St. Mary's have a curator,
Yes.
Curator and an assistant curator, and they are totally supported by municipal money.
Yeah, Dixie Lee and then Brock. Or, sorry,
No, I'm
you,
done.
yeah, okay, Dixie?
Well, I don't want us to get attached to the notion of a permanent position. I think we need to keep in mind that a term position is probably more realistic, and it's certainly an option for a museum professional, because someone with those credentials has to deal with the contents of that building regardless of the final decision. So you extend the term, maybe whatever seems reasonable, 4 months, 6 months after that stuff is dealt with and moved, for that person to then set up professionally the museum, put in place some long-term plans, and then you facilitate volunteers and a volunteer board. And the board that's running it won't have the expertise to make every tiny little decision that has to be made. So I'd just like us to keep that in mind, that we're not necessarily, I don't think, proposing a permanent new staff position. Does that make sense to
Yes.
people?
Yes.
Okay.
Go on.
Yeah, I'd just like to refer back to, Mr. Kivenhove's
Just call me Doug,
talk.
that's fine.
Pardon?
Just call me Doug.
Doug. Both the visions that he provided are valid. Well, the one with the curator and the one that's just a community museum with no status in terms, in the world of museums. They're both valid, and they're both useful. And, they can serve a vital purpose in the community. They can be, either can be well-run or badly run, it all depends. So, and there's nothing derogatory about having a museum that's just a community museum. It's a valid choice to work for.
Okay, Verna?
I agree. I think we need to look at, I know council's not gonna go for a full-time curator. But I think it's something, if we started it as a local museum, and maybe we had on contract a curator on an occasional basis. It would be something, I think, that we would at least get the museum started, and as we can progress, maybe we can progress to the point of hiring a curator on a full-time basis. But I think to start, the funds are not available, let's start small and work up. And I think probably one of the biggest things that's going to make people stop is going to be the tourist information. Because there's nowhere to get tourism information in this town. At least if we've got somebody at the train station, and I fully agree, it's gotta be on a full-time basis, a staff person, because we already saw what it was like before. With councils change their minds every 4 years. And therefore, you may be, and the fact that he's got it 20 years, I think is fabulous, because otherwise, it's apt to be gone in 4 years again. But I think if we start small and we go with what Doug is saying, let's go with an employee, and I think that could be arranged by the town to move a staff person into that position that is looking after tourism and the museum. And I think there's enough people around too that will help as volunteers to do things. We managed before, we put the museum from a terrible mess back into shape. It took us a while, but we did it. And I think that'll happen, but I think we've got to look at it responsibly as starting small, and then you can look at how can we build on this.
Go ahead, Joan.
I think we need a strategic plan. And it's got to be a 3 to 5 year plan, looking at sustainability, because, I mean, start small and work up, whatever. If we don't have a plan, and I think it's pretty difficult to have a strategic plan without a facilitator to guide us through it. And we've been spending a lot of time and putting a lot of hours into do that, and we're a group of very dedicated people to wanting to make this successful. but we've got bits and pieces of stuff, and if we could pull it together, like doing a proposal to council, and it's taking, I mean, in fairness, it's 8 months that we haven't met, and that's put us behind. But if we don't have some kind of strategic plan, that we see a bigger picture of where is this going, where's the money gonna come from? Because that is the huge issue, is where is the money coming from? And we know the municipality doesn't have it. We know that.
Go ahead, Becky.
So I think, just in response to that, Joan, I think that's what council's kind of looking for, though, is a vision, like, they want you to, as part of your proposal, you know, what is, or, explain what your vision is for the museum and things. Where do you see it going? I think that's what they're really looking for. It's, how do you see the museum operating at that location? What is your vision? How do you propose it be operated, you know, the whole staffing component, the volunteer component? How do you think it would be funded? They're looking for, you know, or if you're saying that, you know, X amount of money would be raised a year, fundraising, and, I don't know, grants would be, applied for, you know, to offset costs for students. But we would need the township to contribute X for facility operations. That's kind of what, but then they want you to kind of, like, how do you see it operating? Do you see it operating the same as the museum that is across the street, the way it was run before? Are you looking at it differently? Do you think that it would, you know, have, you know, maybe you're having special events, you know, and what, you know, a couple special events a year, or the curriculum, like, they're not gonna hold you to it. They wanna see what your vision is and how you propose that it be run. You know, if it's part of, you know, think of a non-COVID year when, you know, certain times of year, maybe you can, bring the school children in, or, you know, exhibits, have rotating exhibits, or just, they wanna see what your vision is. So part of determining what that vision is determine, you know, our vision, I'm just gonna throw this out there and just say, you know, writing that proposal is that our vision is to have a community museum, that the museum would be operated this many days a week, these hours, blah, 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 that type of thing, right? They want to see a proposal like that. They want to see things like what the cost would be to retrofit that building down there to make it work, and those things, but an all-encompassing picture of how you see things moving to that location and how you see things operating at that location. That's really what they want to see, is what your vision is, but they want to see it on paper as a package.
Well, I sort of feel this is what we came here today, was going to be present numbers, and I think that can pull in some other things on this. So, okay, Lou, and then
Maybe that's, I'm just saying that the first item here, I forget who did this, but it's beautifully done. The estimated budget for deaccessioning and the estimated budget for restoring the museum, they both start with contracted curator.
Yes.
And I'm saying, if that sounds to me that if we lay that out for council as a proposal, that sounds like that's what we want. But then I'm hearing your conversations with Doug, and I'm saying, I don't think that maybe we as a group figure that is the way we want to go, so I don't think we should be proposing it as our idea. We should see what council decides, because you can't do a contracting curator without asking that person to be fully involved. And then they will dictate, in that position, they will be dictating how you organize whatever happens when you get all those artifacts into a new building. So I'm not sure what our position as a group should be. And whoever wrote this I think we're probably gonna hear from them, Paul.
Right.
Next, and that
Yeah.
maybe will clear that up.
Doug, you had your hand up first?
Yeah, no, I think we should stick to the agenda then, let's just.
Yeah.
finish the
Yeah,
points here.
okay, thank you, appreciate that, we'll move on to okay, Dixie, 7.2 's done, 7.3, Doug.
Okay, 7.3 is equipping and furnishing estimate. And
Well, let Doug go through that first, and then we can put questions to him at the end.
it's a pretty simple spreadsheet here, that Paul and I sat down and worked out. Convenient thing was I just built my garage at my house, and I had pretty current costs on foundations, concrete floors, a whole 9 yards, so. So anyway, the building addition, which is a 30 by 40 three-car garage, it's a three-bay garage right there, that's the first part, the cost of moving it. So, boom, 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 we got all the stuff in there. We have an architect engineer in there for $8,000. Some of these things we think we might be able to cut the cost, but we'll deal with that. We have to put the costs in the first, because it's possible that, for instance, our good friend in Blythe,
Mr. Rutledge?
Rutledge, right? John Rutledge,
Yes,
might do it pro bono, right? But we still gotta put a number in here. So we got $8,000 into the architect, engineer. Paul thought about the building permit, I'd forgotten about that. So, just all the technical stuff. We put in a construction contingency of $12,000 in that part right there. You'll see it says painting supply, paint supply, and then the painting is by volunteers. Travel supply, install and finish with volunteers. Like, I think we can find a fair bit of people that'll chip in here. I know for the excavation too, I can go to Joe Kerr Construction and say, hey guys, like, it's a community event, would you kick this in? But I think I can't predict that now. So we've got $116,000 for the cost to put in a foundation for the museum, for the building, move it over, set it on top, and finish it off and get it completely ready for storage for artifacts in there, okay? Then, we had already received a quote from Space Saver for those archive shelving. That's that beautiful shelving that we saw at the Lambeth, in Middlesex, or whatever it is, Lambeth Museum down by Grand Bend. So that's those shelves, which we believe will hold the entire artifacts from that museum fairly easily, okay? That's gonna be the Cadillac. Like, we'll have a beautiful place to store artifacts and more artifacts, and have them really well organized, easy to access, et cetera. Then the train station upgrades, we looked at the train station itself. UV protection film for the windows and display areas. I remember when, from the curator from,
Lynch Gibson?
she came and she mentioned something like that, so just pulled a number of the air. I hope that's high, $3,000, I think it is high. I think it is. Furniture, displays, office equipment to move from the current location, so no dollars there. We're moving stuff from the other location to this one, so we don't need to go buy that stuff. New displays, however, we just plunked in $20,000, because we want a rotating display, so we thought, well, we're gonna need some kind of flexible sort of display stuff. So, and we threw in another $5,000 for display lighting. And then at the front where you come in, there's gonna have to be a proper reception desk, file cabinet, shelving and stuff like that, so we threw $5,000 in there for that receptionist. And then again, a miscellaneous of $10,000, just chucked it in there for $43,000 to upgrade the train station. And we tacked in an LED sign at the road, a two-sided LED sign, so that you could quite easily advertise your community, your events, things going on in the museum, and just get people to come in the museum sort of thing. So that would be for $50,000 there. We threw on project contingency of $16,000 to amazingly come out at even $300,000. So there we are, that's the numbers. So we figure $300,000 would get us the building ready to go with the shelving, open the doors, let's start doing business. Okay, so that's our best guess on that number right there.
And I can say that the numbers on the first part there are very accurate, with Doug just mentioning about his building, so no questions. Go ahead, I think I saw a hand over here. Oh. Any other questions about that? Oh, you got off lightly. Oh, sorry, Verna, go ahead.
well, I think that we'll probably find as we go along, that there will be people that can do it probably for less. There may be some things that are probably maybe a little bit more, but probably works out in the end pretty close to what's there, I would think. But you always hope that it's gonna cost you a little less.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, about, internet and Wi-Fi, where that might fit in.
I'm thinking that's under the operation cost of the museum. Like,
That's on the next page.
Okay,
like that would be,
Well,
that would be,
it's there
this is
somewhere.
these are kind of one-time costs. That would be your annual cost, like insurance and other things like that.
Yeah, this was just moving that building and having it ready to open the doors. Okay, no other questions for Doug? Okay, we'll move on to, thank you very much, Doug, relocation of the artifacts estimate, 7.4. Ooh, the hands, that was
Yeah.
yours, yes?
So Vicky and Bill and I met twice to work on this. Bill and I met twice, and I did a lot of background research online on costs of moving and requirements for museums and moving. And we used the 2018 report that Elizabeth French Gibson had made to council to base a lot of these, we took a lot of these figures from there. And for the 2018 figures, we added 10% because 2 years have gone by and it'll probably be another year or two before we get to this. So if you will notice, I have in the first 12 months allocated all of the costs to there. And that's, I realize they will go over the 24-month period. I don't know how to assign them. What's important is the bottom figure of $177,250. When we were talking about a curator, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, please, and Bill, that this work cannot be done without using a professional to do it. So it is a contract position specifically to work on the relocation. And when that is finished, that contract comes to an end. It is not an employee of the municipality, it is a contract. Based on the research of the current Ontario Curator's wage scale, we're looking at $60,000 a year. And contractors do not get benefits, so that's a flat fee of the $60,000. The moving costs are estimated to be $10,000, and that's going to be over the 2 years, even though the costs are in the first column. Same with supplies. We thought we should set something aside for dumping and disposal charges in case that there is anything that has to be disposed of. And then there are the administration expenses, and those are based on the current expenses for the municipality, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then we looked at upgrading the computers, updating computer software, purchasing a laptop at $1,500 for that package, $800 a year for internet. We looked at postage and shipping of about $500, and then the utilities, which include the operations budget, which includes heat, hydro, caretaking, cleaning, and the insurance is about $11,000 a year. So, and we set $15,000 aside for contingency because things happen. And so we have a 2-year total of $177,250.
Thank you very
Now,
much.
that's if council agrees that they're gonna relocate the museum. We also looked at, can I move on? Oh, are there
Can
any
we just have
questions
questions
about that one?
first
Yeah.
about that? Anybody have any questions on that one? No, everyone's fine? Okay.
Okay, so then we looked at, okay, if council says no and they're gonna close the museum and deaccession it, what's that gonna cost? And we were looking at, 18-month of having a curator. So it's 90,000 over the 18 months. All the other costs, the moving, the supplies, the dumping charges, the same. And adding in appraisal fees of $1,000 and the administration expenses for phone, computer, internet, postage, for a first year and then for half a year. And the same with the utility, the operations, and a contingency of $12,000 for a total of $139,175. And that's based on the fact that you have to have a professional do the work. Volunteers can work with them, but there has to be a professional in place.
Lou?
It seems to me, Joan and Bill, if you're relocating, do I see someplace in here in which you are taking into account that you will have to provide, particularly if you have a contracted curator, the environmental conditions for a museum?
You mean at the new site?
Mm-hmm.
That's in your,
Yeah.
that's in the
Yeah.
cost. I mean, it's going to be air conditioned, it's going to be, everything, like that's
I
part
got
of it.
15,000 for heating, air conditioning.
$300,000.
Storage.
Okay, I didn't see that as entirely meeting the standard for a museum.
Well, we've got UV,
Yes, I
So-
saw
so in
that,
other
I
words-
saw that.
The artifacts has no windows in it, the artifacts,
you know, yeah, like, the conditions, go ahead, Dick.
Well, I was just gonna say, but the current building already has upgraded HVAC. What you're looking at is the addition being moved, am I right?
yeah, the
Yes,
addition
yes.
being moved and the addition
Yeah.
receiving its own
Air-
heating and air
Yes,
conditioning.
exactly,
heated.
yeah.
as part-
Humidity controlled and all of that. Okay, I just wanted to see that it was someplace, but I wasn't sure that I saw the,
Good question.
Very good point, yes.
Joan?
So Lou, all we are looking at in these two budgets is what's the cost to relocate? What's the cost to deaccession? That's all. We're not looking at other external things like the heat and the moving, the buildings.
but
and-
what
Yeah.
I'm saying, Joan, is when you lead with a contracted curator and you must have one to do the relocation, that person is definitely going to be on top of that.
Yes,
Okay,
and I think it's understood, this can't start until the building's ready. I mean,
Yes, Doug, you had something to add?
I'm just curious, I would have thought that it was gonna cost them more to deaccession than to move. Because
That's what I-
moving, we volunteers, we pick up the stuff, we move it down
Oh.
the street, and,
Sorry.
and so I just, you're kinda like, we're almost making it more tempting for the council to deaccession than move.
We gotta change that.
Well, no, but I mean, Doug and I noticed that and we're sort of surprised beyond, but go ahead, Joan.
Can Vicky answer that around the timelines?
Yeah.
Because I thought the same way you did.
Yeah, so, through you, Mr. Chairman. So, this information was, brought forward from, staff prior to my arrival, and they had worked with Elizabeth French Gibson on this. And that's where it came from, so that all this information came directly from her, and things. And the idea was that if you were deaccessioning, and there was going to be no museum, that process would take 18 months. But if you were moving to a new location, okay, the idea was that there would, some deaccessioning would have to occur, but it was the move and the setup and getting everything ready to go over there was going to take a bit longer. So it was interesting when Dixie Lee was talking about this earlier, about, someone sticking around a little bit longer to get things set up, that it actually lined up with what Elizabeth French Gibson had said. So if it's 18 months to do the deaccessioning, and it's 24 months, so it's 6 months longer, which is what she was saying, earlier. No, Joan did check with me on that, and I went back and checked my records, And that was what, we were advised.
And if I may, Doug, I don't know, do you realize that there are large items up there that weigh hundreds of pounds on the third floor? Do you wanna have volunteers move it, you know what I mean? It has to be moved, and they have to be stored or packed or whatever to a curator standard. We can help with files and, you know what I mean, that,
Okay.
okay?
There's a pile of stoves and.
Those stoves are,
Organ.
they had a couple of employees do it, it was rough for them to move them, but they did, like they just manhandled them up.
Okay. No,
Sorry.
I was just looking for explanation.
Where in this do I see the period of time and the cost that it's gonna take to try and contact all of the people that have things in the museum?
No, the rules have changed.
We don't have to do that anymore?
Really?
We don't have to send it back to the owners?
No.
No.
According to the, well,
Well,
We're not allowed to.
Through,
we're
yeah,
not allowed to, no.
Pardon?
correct me if I'm wrong, if they're on loan, it's one thing, but if,
Mhm.
once they were donated, that's it, you don't have to contact them, it's only if there's something that's on loan.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe that was some of the stuff in the bottom, the CKNX barn dance stuff, some of that. I remember when you took us through there, we heard a bit of that, so. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering with the, for the deaccessioning budget, the 10,000 for moving, does that maybe include some storage? Because you haven't yet found a home for all of these things, and yet, you know, maybe that building has to be kept open longer than anybody would want, or kept heated. I'm just wondering about that, or if that can be covered under a contingency.
And
You know.
another question we had, Dixie, if I may, is just that, supposing another museum, if they deaccession, they will take your collection, well, who covers the moving costs? We don't know that, so we put it in there, I mean, it might be shared or,
Right, okay,
Okay,
we
thanks.
just didn't know.
well, that's good.
Do we have anybody that would take anything? I thought all the museums were crowded as we are.
That's part of the problem, yeah. But I mean, the procedures are well documented as to how you must deaccession, and they've been changing in the last couple of years in particular.
Okay,
Paul?
yes, sorry.
Joe?
Oh, sorry, Joe.
So I did some research into moving museums, and there are, I guess that we'll call them guidelines, around how things have to be moved and where they're to be packaged and everything like that. So we really do need somebody in a contracted position to oversee that. Sure, volunteers can do a lot of it, but we have to do it the right way.
Right. Okay, is any other questions with these three? Okay, I'll just go and ask Dave to give his input on 7.6.
See, it printed the Barn Dance Historical Society was attempting to return all the possible items to the owner or donor or the families prior to COVID-19 shutdown. There are still items to locate owners for, so there may be more items than those listed below that may be available for the North Huron Museum. Some of the contracts for loaned and donated items were lost when the Barn Dance Museum was flooded several years ago. Items we will be able to donate at the present to the North Huron Museum would include the 6 display cabinets with upper and lower glassed in areas, the 8 vertical display cabinets suitable for displaying clothing, and there's a television and VCR suitable for showing video items, and 2 large wall plaques telling the CKNX radio and TV story, and a large wall plaque of the CKNX Barn Dance Stars history book, and pictures of the barn dance performers printed on masonite there. I'd say maybe 3 feet by 2.5 or something like that. Pictures of the CKNX radio performers framed in window frames. And there's various plaques and posters for shows, mostly reproduced in wood backing. Another thing, when they're mentioned lighting, we put track lights in there to shine on the display cabinets. Probably they could be removed and used over again.
And there is track lighting in our museum, we could probably take, you
Yes.
could take that kind of stuff with you.
Okay,
Dave, do you have any concerns about your last sentence in the first paragraph about items that are loaned or donated? What are your plans for those if you can't find the original paperwork? Just
Well, anything that's donated, our letters patent said where they were to be given to a like organization, like
and you
another
would, you would
museum.
look into that. I mean, your committee or board would look
Yes.
into. Okay, thank you. I'm just,
We haven't been able to meet all,
I know. Yeah.
yeah, so
Thank you.
I'm at a standstill.
okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
This raises another question. The Barn Dance isn't a museum. This building across here isn't a museum. So why are we subjecting ourselves to all of these stringent rules and regulations which are going to cost us a pile of money, and we're not even a museum officially?
Bill, go ahead.
We have a collection though of artifacts. Some of them are quite rare. I mean, we have paintings and so on. So whether or not it's I would like to see them treated as,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean? That's why.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of what I would say.
Absolutely, but that's out of the goodness of your heart, our hearts.
Well,
I'm really wondering what the legal status is of.
but a museum, it
this.
depends on what you mean. You, an accredited museum or a museum. You look them up in the dictionary, the
Yeah,
definition
I
is
realize
slightly
that.
different.
But are we accredited?
Are we what?
No.
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 So
We,
why
we
worry?
used to be.
Why be worried?
Okay, do you have something to share?
Well, I'm just gonna go back to the provincial document. A community museum doesn't just mean a bunch of stuff looked after by volunteers. I mean, the township owns the building and owns the items and artifacts. And so it's a community museum and it should be treated that way the artifacts and everything should be treated according to the standards. I don't think you can say it's not a museum. I disagree.
Oh, sorry, Lou.
I think, Brock, that, you can hardly look across the street and say we're treating everything in there as museum quality artifacts at this moment. That they have not been treated that way at all in the last how many years. And,
We haven't
that's
been
the
arrested.
point, but the point also was, as our earlier discussion, are we looking to our new setting as being a museum and therefore looking for qualifications and grants and a reputation of that? Or are we saying no? And then you're quite right. I don't think we need to worry about any of it because the building is not meeting the standard. And in my memory, Bill and Dixie Lee and Verna, there are a lot of artifacts in there that haven't been treated like they're museum quality.
No, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Boy.
No, your point's well taken because I think we're starting to go around the corner on this today.
But we were, but we're no longer accredited because we don't have a museum, period. But that doesn't mean it's not.
Okay, Vicky has something to share, then I'll go to Doug. Oh, that's before my time.
No, I was just, all I was saying to the chairman was that it was an accredited museum though at one time.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm not sure, like, yes, maybe it doesn't have the accreditation any longer, but it's still a museum.
Yes, I I agree.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
We used to get grants.
yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, go ahead, Doug.
So,
I thought I had a conversation with Jody Jerome about moving the artifacts down from the one location to the other. And it didn't sound that complicated when I had that discussion with Jody Jerome. I saw, like, that we had to go through all kinds of hoops and, you know, go the expensive route to move the stuff down. If you're identifying the precious items that had to be very carefully handled and said, don't touch that stuff, but the rest of the stuff, go ahead, pick it up and move it down the street. Like, I mean,
Some stuff you're supposed to wear white gloves,
yeah,
and some things, like the
Yeah.
machinery, you would not wanna put your white gloves on.
so I mean, but I'm not talking, because obviously I'm a builder, I'm not a museum guy. And so you guys might just be like, say that, but, I mean, I'm trying to, we were hoping that, you know, and I think Bernie Bailey was either like hoping that, hey, if we don't have to deaccession and go through all that legal schmiegel stuff to deaccession, we can save a lot of money with volunteers, working together and moving this and maybe overseen by Jody Jerome. I don't know, like that was just a conversation I thought I had.
Go ahead, Bill.
I think it may depend on what, if they go the route that we hire a contract with position to do the move, they make the decision on what needs, if they say, sure, let's just get a bunch of volunteers in and pack this up, fine. But to me, a mover, if you wanna have a moving company come in, I think, doing it now, you've got furniture up there that's over 100 years old. Like, do you wanna move that?
I
We
mean,
moved it.
I do all kinds of stuff with volunteers around town, like, we
Yeah.
have a great bunch of volunteers in this town that do stuff, but if that's like taboo, then, you know, that's fine, but, I mean, you take the chair and you don't go dropping it down the stairs, but you move it carefully down the stairs, and you put it on a trailer, and you drive slowly across town, and you walk it into your,
Is there
Storage
any
buildings.
liabilities at all on that? or-
That's what I was gonna ask.
certainly.
No, that was sort of like, you know, a volunteer
I-
gets injured.
I wouldn't trust a mover any more than I trust a volunteer.
I mean, we do lots of stuff with volunteers. I mean, when we sign off a liability, thing,
Yeah.
so that we're.
Does that answer your question
It's
then?
our fault.
Well, I don't know, because I
Oh.
wouldn't be the person liable. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
looking to Vicky and Paul about what's the township's stance on using volunteers for that kind of activity? That's just my question.
I don't even know how to answer that.
Well, they did for the theater, did they not?
We did, like, we put in, you know, a month of work with, you know, we must put in 400 hours of volunteering in this facility here,
Yeah.
or probably more than that.
Well,
We repainted it and everything.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a bit of a difference here in liability too. I mean, the physical work could be done by volunteers and things like that, and I think that, the volunteers may or may not be able to, I'll look into it further with Elizabeth French Gibson, but may be able to do the moving, or some of the moving may. But I think it's been very clear though that contracted curator has to be overseeing that, and has to be responsible in making those decisions.
You have an overseer to help your volunteers here, right, Doug? There's someone who says, what do I do now? You gotta put this, we're putting this up?
No.
Right, okay, so that's what I'm thinking, the curator would be the
Yeah.
one who overview it and say, no, we're not moving that, we're gonna get that professionally moved. You guys can pack this, maybe?
Yeah, I don't think, so I guess I'll stop, because I don't think we debate the numbers here, so just, you know, these are the numbers that come, and that's what we'll present. Right?
Yeah.
So, and if there is a savings to be made, then we'll cross that bridge, we'll get there, at least now, you're covered.
Go ahead, Vic.
So I was just gonna say, you know, seeing these numbers now, you may want to digest them and things, that's fine. That's certainly fine, and you may wanna think about them in terms of, you know, how can they be reduced, you know, different people have mentioned here today that, you know, volunteers may be able to do this, or may be able to get a donation from this company or that company, and you may build that into, your budgets or something like that. But I think there's some things in here though are kind of hard numbers, but I'm still going back to that very first thing about, for you to move forward, because you're gonna have to put this all together as a package and a proposal to council, and explain to council what you're wanting to do. So one of the things that you're gonna have to decide is community museum versus an accredited museum. Cause part of the next step is working on that operating budget and things, and that's going to play a part in that, because if you're proposing now, that it be an accredited museum, then you're gonna have a full-time staff person. We did have that debate, didn't we, Doug, that, full-time staff versus a, volunteer full-time curator, and we weren't sure about that in terms of what was acceptable, but anyway, it would be tough to have a full-time volunteer curator for that purpose, so, but I think, you know, the information's been presented, we're all presenting a lot of information here today, but, there needs to be some motions to accept it or to, approve it, or, you know, something that you agree to it as a whole group as to how to move forward.
Okay, after looking at what we've been presented today by the 4 different groups, 5, and we see some numbers, what are we going to be looking at? Like what do you people see? Because I saw one time when it came up about a community or accredited, I saw there's a variance of heads nodding different ways there. So I figure that's where we're at. Like, we gotta come up with that, because for Doug to be able to make a presentation, we have to show, because they'll be wanting to know how long we're going to get the money. In fact, I'm hoping by next week we're going to be able to be coming up with some of these numbers, because I know on the building we're planning on a year maybe of coming up with a $300,000, and because the numbers like that are going to be asked, and so.
Do you wanna make a motion?
Yeah.
Anybody wanna make a motion?
Does somebody want to make a motion on this? Like, to go with either what you said, a community or a accredited, like, we have to decide that, I feel, just by, go ahead.
I'm just looking up the definition of community museum, because I need to get it in my head before I can go, oh yes, we should do this,
Right.
oh yes, we should
Yes.
do that. So I feel like I need to be
You gotta
better
pull that
educated
document
on
out
that.
again.
Oh, Dixie has a
Well,
copy.
I just have kept it in my binder, so. Do you want me to read some part of it?
Well, I'm on the government site, and it says
Right.
the 10 revised standards for community museums represent the minimum requirements for the operation of a good community museum. Community museums need to meet the standards in order to qualify for funding, so that's not even talking about an accredited museum, it's
No.
talking about a community museum, I'm sorry, which still has to meet standards to get grants. I'm just not,
Well,
you know.
okay, copy I have from earlier divides things into, first of all, the governance standard. And then there's the finance section and the collections and exhibit section. So basically, the community museum must be governed by a publicly accountable body. And Lou and I addressed that.
Mhm.
Established by a written document or documents including a description of authority for the museum and so on. And that would be a motion from council, correct? And so the documents would include the mission statement, the purpose, the commitment to the role in the public trust, who the museum serves, and so on, what it will collect, the impact in its community, how it will dissolve assets and liabilities. and then it lays out what the governing body must do. I don't know, do we all, if someone doesn't have a copy of this, maybe it would be worth, sharing them with anyone who doesn't have it.
Through you, Mr.
What do you
Chairman,
think?
it was shared, earlier when we
Mhm.
at the very beginning of the committee and things, we could resend it out, yeah.
Right.
Lou?
I had written down here that the governing, managing body of people that represent your community, including the counselor, and I wrote down that this body cannot have a mandate that includes other municipal entities, libraries, tourist office, or recreation center.
And is this mandated by
The
rules of
Ontario, yeah.
Okay.
And so, those, sorry Dixie Lee, go
No,
ahead.
that's okay.
No, I'm not gonna say any more
No,
there,
no,
but
I
I
don't-
think that we've got to watch that we
Yeah,
keep things clean.
yes, but I don't think that statement precludes it being housed with another entity.
No,
As long as the two are separated.
yes, but we've gotta watch that.
I think we have.
I think we have,
Mhm.
but I don't know.
Okay, it says on our agenda, our next is go ahead.
You didn't get a motion, did you?
Oh, sorry.
Do we want to?
Yeah.
Are you trying to get a motion as to whether we're gonna go, what way we're gonna go with?
Well, it seems that we're getting divided things.
How about,
Go ahead.
Suggestion, and, Paul, is that, whoever's doing like daily operations programs and operations budget looks at the two options when the reports come back, so we can say, oh, to operate it as a communities museum is gonna cost this much, and these are things that are involved. To operate as a full-blown museum is gonna cost this much, that's gonna involve. Then even as a committee, we can discuss and debate and hopefully get that in time, and then we can make an informed decision as to which direction we wanna propose to council.
Doug, the thing that worries me about talking too much about money is I don't think my heart and my soul I don't think I want to vote in a direction to say which is gonna cost the least, therefore that's what we have. I would like to know, and you people live here, and I don't all the time, and these are when I wish I did, what does this community want? I know what you want, because you've got a special place for your heart and soul in a slightly different spot than other people, but what does the community, if you're the counselor in this community, what does this community want? Or do you even care?
Verna?
Well, I would hope this community would want something, because right at the present time, we've lost the police, we've lost the campground. They're gonna tear down the armories.
I
Isn't it
remember
about time
Rob-
that they decided we needed something, instead of tearing things down, that we needed something to build upon?
Well, you've got 4 gorgeous architectural features on the main street of this community, and it blows my mind every time I look at them, that nothing is being done with them. And so I think Doug's contribution is tremendous. But I also remember Brock saying early on, he comes from Blythe, I'm representing East Wawanosh, and he said one day, and I agreed, and I kept it in my head, he said, I'm sure that most of the people in this North Huron community don't even know we have a museum. And I think that we who sat on this museum, we felt that most of the time. We had to work like crazy to get people through the door. And I think Brock's comment was an accurate one. So what does the community want?
But if you do not promote nothing happens.
But we did.
We did to an extent, but it was low.
Well, come on,
We did it without,
we were
Support.
nothing volunteers working like crazy, is what we were doing. And we did promote as much as we could, but we never had any money,
No, I know.
never any money.
Well, this is why I think this is a unique place to, if it could go. Like my heart's all in it, but it is very unique, and I think it has advantage. Like on the main street, I told this to the council the other night. There's not a better spot on the main street as where it is. Situation, just so many avenues for it. But as you say, I see where you're coming from, Lou. Do the people want it or not? You build it, they'll come. Look at it. I'd look at it that way, maybe. You know, like a little different. Sorry, Doug. Go ahead.
I mean, every community, you know, I mean, not everybody sees all these different things, everybody has different priorities, right? And so, but, you know, that building was just about sold for $1 and ended up in some lady in Woodstock hauling it out of town, right? And then Town and Country Homemaker stood up and said, hey, like, we can't lose this building, and they bought the building, and they raised the money, and they fixed the building up, and it's, I mean, it was just a trucking company's warehouse.
Right. Be
You know,
remembered.
and so there, you see, in a community, it gets to be rally together and say, let's save this thing. That's what happened to this theater here. So,
Yes.
so, you know, so we as a group are the group that are saying, look, we've got this gem, this museum and all these artifacts and this history, we can't lose it. Not everybody's gonna be there with that, but we're saying, we'll put the sweat and equity and the fundraising behind this thing to make this happen. And some people will appreciate it, and a lot of times it's your out-of-towners that appreciate it more than your in-towners. That happens with the Blythe Theater, you know, for crying out loud. Like, you know, I hear them complaining, nobody from town supports us. Just gotta get over it, like, carry on. If you have, you know, and we believe that the vision is there. I mean, that the demographics are there, that more and more people are gonna be doing day trips and looking for places. And from BI perspective, business perspective, is like, we wanna become a destination, a place to go. Not just the theater, I mean, not just the museum, but also the community trail, and you know, there's all these different things, assets around here of
Yes.
things for people to come and see and tour, and so,
How many towns have a Nobel Prize winner?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Sorry, go
I know
ahead.
No,
that,
it's
Verna,
okay. I was-
and I admire that, and you know that I'm a supporter of that terrifically. But I also know that you have to work mighty darn hard to make a museum a destination. And you've got to think about education, you've got to think about the history of all the immigrants who have come to this entire area to make it their life and their home, and they have to see themselves represented. It's a lot of, you know, creative industry that goes into making a museum, whether it's a community museum or whether it's an official recognized museum recognized by our province.
I think we're very fortunate too, though, that we have Jody Jerome in our area.
Is she
Because-
qualified?
Yes, and she is
some
right
property
into history. If you,
she's accredited.
she writes articles in magazines all the time about history of different
I know she's
places.
very involved, but I just didn't
Yes.
know if she had a qualification definition of, against
She
her
used
name.
to be the
Wasn't
curator.
I think the discussion way back had to do with a strategic plan and that sort of thing. And I think that's one of the values that comes out of that normally is a deep understanding in everybody about what we're trying to create, what we're trying to develop, so that we can pass it on to other people and show it to them. And I think we're a long way from getting to that point now. Maybe we are individually, I don't know. But to me, this is not a North Huron edifice, museum. This is not a North Huron museum. It's a Wingham museum. we have to make it something else, and that takes effort. And, I don't think the people of Blythe consider it their museum in any sense,
You don't.
and it's never been treated as such, really. I know there are a few things here and there that are from that community, but it's not part of it. So that's a big task in itself, changing our mindset as well as changing the community's mindset and changing the image of that.
Well, that's why you
of
and
that
I are
building.
sitting here, because we, in a very indirect way, you far more involved than I, but we are here to say, okay, we also live in North Huron, or have the right to say we live in North Huron, and if indeed this museum becomes a community, then, as you say, we have to market it that way, we have to make it that, it has to belong to everybody.
Well, it's also Morris Turnberry Museum. There's a lot of stuff in there at Morris Turnberry.
That's right, it's a complex collection of people.
Okay, I think we should keep moving on here.
Yep.
Correspondence, there's none. Next steps. 9.1, daily operations. I'm just going to read the four things. 9.2, promotions and programs plan. 9.3, operations budget. 9.4, fundraising plan. So, who's going to do who now?
It says on the work plan.
Oh, work plan. Thank you. Okay, we have,
It might be on the back too, the other side.
yeah, we have that all figured out then? Okay.
Who is it? Cause I didn't get a sheet back from you.
I emailed it to you.
What?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, well, that's no good, I got no printer.
Oh, go ahead, who is it?
Okay, here we go. Daily operations, come here. Operation, which one?
I don't have any-
I'll let Amanda, she can read that better than I can. Amanda will read out.
Operations budget, Doug, Joan, and Vicky. The fundraising plan, that's all of the committee members, but we could,
Can't hear you.
All the committee members. Go ahead, Doug.
I just think that we don't need to come up with a fundraising plan. Like, that's crazy, like,
It's down the,
council has to make a decision, and then we're given time to go raise the money. We can't say, gee, we're gonna get $50,000 from Trillium, we're gonna get 20,000 from that, we're gonna get 5,000 from that, 5,000. It's bizarre. Like, we will go out and raise the money, and we'll have a period of time to do it, and we'll go beg and not steal, but, you know, whatever, to raise the money. So I can't, in my own mind, think of a fundraising plan. We will
Okay,
apply for grants.
we'll leave
We'll go
that.
after businesses, we'll go after individuals.
Yeah, you said that the other day to me, how you're planning.
Like,
Go
so,
ahead.
Through
Vic?
you, Mr. Chair. But I think what it is they want something generic. They're just looking for something generic, Doug, saying that,
well, then
you
I'll
know,
just-
for the,
just
for
what I
the,
said.
for moving the building or something like that, you know, the committee is going to fundraise, whatever.
Well,
Well,
I
the
think.
fundraising plan will be to raise all the money that's needed to do this.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yep. So,
Well, part of that
I
too
mean,
is,
when we made the proposal for the theater, we didn't lay out exactly how we were gonna raise the money. We said, we'll raise the money.
and I think they're just looking for a commitment.
Yeah.
That, yeah,
okay,
Okay.
okay,
We
that's,
don't need a plan.
formal plan.
well, and there may very well be things that's even in our budget. Like if you talk to Rutledge, maybe it's a
Okay.
case of, he does it for nothing. If
Yeah.
those are types of
Yeah,
things
so
that we can
and
reduce
that's
the
right.
cost.
So we can also have donations in kind.
Right.
Okay, so that's fine. So
Bill had his hand up next.
Did we have a motion we were supposed to pass, or did that got waylaid?
I thought that
I think we just,
Get labeled.
Trustee,
The motion never came forward.
Never came forward. I thought we're going to look into these things here. And then,
Yeah,
we
we're gonna,
ditched the
yeah.
motion.
oh,
Pardon?
we did, okay, thank you, I wasn't sure
Yeah.
where. that
Yeah.
was.
yeah, it's going to go through. Okay, go ahead, Amanda. Oh, sorry, Joan first.
Looking at an operations budget, how are we supposed to come up with a budget if we don't have a plan of how the museum is going to operate. I mean, that's like pulling fairy dust out of the sky and saying, we're gonna do this, this, and this, here's our operations plan, but we haven't even talked about how that museum might operate. So, I'm fully willing to work on a budget, but we've gotta have some foundation.
Need direction.
Okay, is that like you're asking for the 10 hours a week from the, is that what you're looking for
I
in
don't
that?
know, are we? Like, what is the operations plan? What are we doing? Is it going to be that certain number of, because we have that, and Vicky and I have talked about some of that and some of those numbers, but is that what we're going for, is a staff person? And we haven't talked about what days of the week is it gonna operate, how many hours of a week are you going, like, there's so many unanswered questions. And it takes a lot of effort to pull a budget together that's credible. And I'm frankly not willing to put my time into spinning my wheels. I am willing to work with people if we know where we're going, but if we don't have a clear direction on how it's gonna operate, what are the hours of operation, what are the days of operation, all of those kinds, how are you supposed to figure out money?
Lou, you
Well,
had
and Joan, don't we have to back up one more step? What kind of a museum are we
Yeah.
seeing for ourselves? What are we recommending? What does your community want? Don't we have to answer those questions first? And then you can go and start putting a framework on
Yeah.
it.
Go ahead,
I
Jay.
think our committee has to come up with, how are we running this museum? What kind of hours are you talking, what kind of time frame? Is it summer, is it year round, is it like, when are you involving people? That involves money. With students, you have to know when they're gonna be there, things like that. We have to have more facts.
Okay, Verna.
I thought that was already settled in
What?
the agreement with Doug, that it was to be open 7 days a week,
No,
5 days a week,
5 days a week.
right?
But-
So you figure out a
Accepted.
salary for 5 days a week.
Well, that's easy enough to do, I mean, we can do that, but you're
And then you do
talking
a
about
student
summer
for the summer.
students. Who's gonna supervise them, what's that gonna cost, where, how many, what are they working?
Well, that's
April
where
till
you
September,
apply
or-
for, the municipality applies for. That's what we had over here all
We could
summer,
put staffing
every year.
and hours in the next steps.
Okay, we can put in Amanda has something here?
We could put staff and hours in the next steps to bring back to the next meeting.
Can't hear you.
Bring back staff and hours at the next meeting? Staffing, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I just wrote down things like, if we
Can we
have 5
just-
days a week,
Three-
one Saturday or Sunday, not both, summer student, a contracted curator, part-time, like 2 months a year, whatever, would that help if you just had some of these numbers to look at?
Well, most students are out of school, like the ones that are applying for these kind of things, they're at school in April.
Okay, so,
And they're looking for a job that probably goes from the end of April till September, right? So is that what we're talking about?
It's-
Yes.
Ripple, I don't know.
Doug, go ahead.
Like, for me, with the proposal that I made to the town, okay, I wanted to make a proposal that was doable and acceptable, and I think we gotta go with the base plan, the absolute base plan to go to council if we want to see a museum in this town. And so, so to me, the daily operation thing is asking for Vicky to transplant one of her staff to be in the museum and to do her job in the museum, but give 8 to 10 hours a week to the museum. And what I talked with them before was, when it comes to summer, there's gotta be like grant programs like a student grant program sort of thing that would cover that. I wasn't asking the town to provide staff for weekends, cause that's costly, because, you know, and so, and volunteers, like hopefully we have a good group of volunteers that say, hey, I'll come in and do this Saturday from X to then, kind of thing. So, but if we have to, like, trust me, we gotta go for the base plan, we gotta go for the absolute rock bottom
Yep.
annual
We
cost
won't get
to present to the town. And maybe if the museum's rocking and it's going good and everything's fine, and maybe somebody passes away and leaves a $3 million foundation donation to the museum,
it. Thanks, Doug.
you know, no, it won't be me, okay? Then, well, I'm pretty young too, so I'd be a long time, okay? That's why I say 20 years. I'm like, hey, we'll do what you want, what I mean. So, so I mean, so we can talk and theorize about all the cool stuff, but I'm trying to take you back to practical. Sorry, it does come down to money. It does, and so, to me, like, the operations plan has to be the basic, bare minimum cost to present to council for them to approve it. And then we get the museum doors open, and we have a staff person there, we have regular hours, we have volunteers being coordinated by a staff person, and saying, hey, and hopefully we can build up, there's plenty of retiring people, there's people that love museums that maybe would, my wife, she loves, if she had her time, she would be doing museum tours, okay, so there's people around, we have to look at those kind of possibilities and solutions, but if we start talking about the Cadillac plan, I'm telling you, and we're just gonna spin our wheels here, talking about all the vision and mission and all that kind of stuff, let's just get the place open, let's get this report in front of council, and get the doors open with a base plan.
So are
Bare
you
minimum.
using the term, community museum?
I think you have to.
Well,
Like,
that's
if-
fine,
if-
but I
if-
think
if
that
a
we've
private
gotta say,
museum-
we've gotta hear that then.
And slash tourism, and if we, because I can go to
Makes
the,
a
there's a
difference.
here, there's a North Huron Economic Development Committee, okay? And they want to see tourism happen. I can go to that committee and say, guys, we need you, guys and ladies, we need you to support, come to this council meeting where I make this presentation, to support us and say, yes, we believe that we need to have a visitor tourism information in this town, and this is part of our solution. We're behind this thing, right? And the BI saying, yes, we're behind it, but it just has to be the base plan. It's the bare minimum. Don't stack this cost on this thing. Maybe later on, as we're open and we're operating and it's humming and it's looking good, we've got the groups of volunteers, we start looking for some costs, we say, and then maybe we say, we need to go for some funding, right? And then we can use the tourism side of that thing. We can go say, hey, because here in county, it's all kind, I get emails from the county all the time, it's all about tourism.
Yes. That's a pushing it.
It's everywhere, tourism. And so, we focus on that, and we just do our darndest to get that far.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
Okay, so if we do a base budget based on, there is a North Huron staff there, and 10 hours a week is allocated to museum costs, and they're there Monday to Friday. Sure, you can have volunteers on the weekend, and that's fine, we can do that budget easily enough, but you're not gonna get a grant for a summer student, you're not gonna get summer student funding out of any kind of museum pot. I don't know whether you might get it, and summer students have to be supervised. They cannot be, they have to be.
Then it'll
Can't
have
be
to be,
left.
then it's gotta be volunteer driven on the weekends then, like, don't just forget about the student thing.
Okay,
I want to know how important to council is the vision of this museum, because if we just have a rock bottom price, but no plans for the first 3 years to tell them, does that make a difference to council? Is it always just the numbers?
The numbers are certainly playing a big role
Yes.
in it, absolutely, they're playing a big role, but they also wanna see a vision. They wanna see that vision, they wanna see, what you plan to offer and what, you know, growth and, you know, and attractions and how it's going to create.
And that's your 9.2 on the
And
agenda.
they want that in this proposal.
9.2 on the
Yeah.
agenda, right there.
Promotion, it's,
Promotions and programs plan.
And that's BF, VS, DL, and LU,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can you
So,
say that again?
oh, BF, VS, DL, and LU. Sorry for the short
Oh,
form.
yeah, I know that, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good.
I
Did
don't
you
have
say
that sheet.
VL?
Did you say
Yeah.
me?
Yes,
We've got it.
Yes.
Dixie Lee,
Yeah.
We've got
DL.
Dixie Lee.
It's been so long. I
Oh, I'm
remember.
sorry.
I said
Oh,
BL.
no, all I have is a draft
Okay.
one.
yeah,
That's,
That's-
okay,
yeah.
so 9.2's looked after then? Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I don't see anywhere in the draft work plan a committee to look after and actually write down something about daily operations.
Yeah,
I can't find where
I
that
noticed
fits.
that. It
So
must
I
have
think,
been-
do we need
Yeah.
to
I don't
pull
think
some
it was
people
in there.
together for that?
I don't
and
think that
just
was in
say-
there.
Come
Not-
up with something.
So you say no with that?
Yeah, we're
I,
not.
I couldn't find it, so I'll just
No, I
take it
can't
out.
Yeah, I think
I thought
that
that
was.
was actually on the operations budget.
Mhm.
of the-
Operations,
But the
Doug, Joan,
plan
and
is
Vicky.
different.
Yeah.
than
See,
the
that's
budget.
operations.
Promotions and programs plan is Bill, Verna, Dixie Lee, and Lou.
Mhm.
Okay.
Programs.
So
That's promotions and programs, Lou.
That's
So then,
who?
Okay,
so what's daily operations mean then? Because I know operation budget, I was
We
thinking.
took it out because it wasn't on the work plan
Yeah.
unless you see it
Oh,
on.
okay.
It was
Yeah.
an
Oh, you
error.
took it out?
It was an
Yeah.
error.
Oh.
Okay, so operations budget.
Oh, sorry
That's
for
what I was
joining
looking
in
for
on
along lines of, that's
What would you like to do?
utilities and internet connection and.
So I got down Bill, Dixie Lee, and who else?
You and
Okay, I'm getting confused.
4 of us,
Who's the fourth one?
you.
me and you and Dixie
Lou.
Lee and Lou. Me and you.
Oh, and Lou. Oh, okay, that's who I was missing.
Okay,
I already started on.
Okay,
the
now,
Fundraising.
operations budget,
It's been so long.
Doug, Joan, and Vicky, right?
Yeah.
That's the operations, okay? Fundraising, we're leaving that till Doug had some words in there that he's gonna be saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anything else to add?
Joan.
Joan,
Joan.
where's
I
Joan?
have a question. Doug, you were saying something about operations with internet and stuff like that. What, can you say that again?
Well, I mean, we'll talk about it, but I mean, operations is the cost of operating the place on an annual basis.
Okay, is that what we're looking at?
It
So
says-
who's looking at, yeah, so we're looking at running it on a, okay, so that's gonna include staffing and everything,
The
right?
10 hours of staff.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good.
okay, good with that then, okay?
Because he council says, okay, so you're gonna raise all the money for it, what's it gonna cost us?
Yeah.
What's our budget
Right.
line gonna cost to run the museum
Right,
over the
Pretty
year,
got
good.
it.
every year?
Yeah. Okay, it's got that. And 9.3's looked after. 9.4, we're just leaving that. Doug's gonna mention that at the talk. So, any wrap up things? Anything you wanna?
Do we have a time that we're looking at, that we're gonna do a presentation to council?
We talked about that the other day, Doug and I, but,
Well, if we're meeting January the 7th for our next meeting, our museum meeting, and hopefully we're gonna wrap this whole package together at the next meeting, agree on it, then at the next council meeting, which is gonna be in February then, because I think you just have one council meeting.
yeah,
in-
just one in,
So we'd be we'd ask to be on the agenda for the first council meeting in February.
Good. Get it
Hopefully,
moving.
does that look all right for everybody?
I'm just concerned about pulling the whole thing together and making
Yeah.
sure we've got everything we think we should have.
They'll tell us if we're missing
Decide that
anything.
in January.
No, but,
we could, if at the end of the next meeting, we aren't satisfied, we
Right.
just aren't comfy,
Yeah, we can
then
just
that-
stay-
because-
yeah.
what we could consider doing then is that, I mean, I think I was told someone that I'm doing a presentation to council, okay?
Yes.
So So then basically I could prepare that presentation to council, and then we meet one more time in January.
That's
Right.
down.
That's a good
And I
idea.
say,
Okay,
okay,
that-
guys, here's what I'm gonna do, because it's gonna be the dog and pony show. I mean, we're gonna have slides running and, videos of dancing. No, I'm just kidding.
Lou,
I mean, this has to be sold. They have
It
to
has.
see the value of what
Just
this
the
is to the
soundtrack.
community, right? So then, I can prepare that in January, and we have a second meeting, and I'll just say, okay, here's a slide projector, and here's a dry run of what we're gonna try to present to council. And then you guys can critique it, we can tweak it, and then,
That's what we were worried about, I think, yeah, that's good.
Sounds good.
so we still within January, we're ready to roll, and we can be on the agenda for February for council.
Lou,
Amanda, is it possible for you to send out to all of us an email for everybody else on the committee? Like if I go home, I don't have telephone numbers for,
Oh, each other's email
I know
addresses.
Verna's, but can we, or is that something that you're not allowed to do?
What do you mean, like a mass email to everybody with contact
I would
information?
just like to have
Contact.
an email address so that if I wanted to,
Email and telephone.
Of each of the
well,
members.
I just want some way to be in contact with somebody if all of a sudden I want to discuss some of this and it isn't a formal
Yeah, I
meeting.
can
Is that
provide that.
possible?
Yep.
okay, very good. I'll be
Okay,
looked
thank
after, Lou.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay, anything else? I think I'm feeling a lot better. Oh, sorry.
Can we just set the date for the second meeting in January now?
Our first one is January 7th, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it'd be
The
February.
7th for the first one,
Oh,
yeah.
what?
Yeah, no, they want to have a second one in January to tie everything together.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe, I don't know. Could be.
Like maybe, we must remember too, folks, that it could be back to virtual too.
Right.
That I hope and not with this, but
So do you
I
want-
mean for us.
Assuming that's all fine, we go 2 weeks after then, like. we
2
meet
weeks?
On the 7th, and then we meet on the 21st.
We can do that, have an extra meeting, it's okay, it's to
But
do
we
that.
missed 8 of them.
Yeah.
So,
Good call.
Did you say the 21st?
And then-
January
Yeah, that's
21st, is that
Does
okay?
that work?
I'll
That's-
have to check with the schedule, but for now I'll put it in and I have to contact Rochelle.
Oh, yeah.
What's,
2 o'clock.
Is that okay?
what's this date? I'm not,
This is a follow-up meeting.
21st, after, 2 weeks
Yeah.
after, to
21.
to
look at it.
bring everything
It's our
together,
proposal.
Brock.
When's the first
Right.
Maybe
one?
the
7th.
where,
7th and the 21st.
7th and then the 21st,
It would be here, yeah.
yeah.
okay?
If,
And if we can't meet here, Amanda will keep us in the loop, okay?
Okay.
if we can't meet here has to do with if Durham Perth goes red, like from orange to red COVID, then they won't allow in-person meetings anymore.
Yeah.
So
We have
that's,
to Zoom,
then we gotta Zoom the meeting, which is,
you can Zoom.
so we can do it, but let's just hope and pray that we don't
Yeah.
get to red.
Exactly. So I really appreciate the input that came today. I think we got a lot done, and it is a lot of questions, because it is nerve-wracking at the council meeting. I don't know, maybe Vicky found it easy, but it was hard, and I can see where you folks are, honestly, so. I appreciate just how it all came together the last 25 minutes or so here today. Okay.
We appreciate you,
I'm
Sharon.
sorry, we're on to
Sharon.
schedule the next meeting. We have that, it's the 7th, followed by the 21st. Adjournment that the North Huron Museum Committee agrees that there being no further business before the committee, the meeting be hereby adjourned at 3:54.
Oh, precise.
Did I see your hand?
Oh,
Do I move?
okay, sure, fine.
Dave,
I was just
All in
getting a
favor?
thumbs up on the timing.
there. Okay, is that everything that you-